It's coming up to 20 to 8. And on the planning front, let's talk about something here in Chelmsford right now. Plans to build affordable housing on flood zones in the city are set to be discussed by the council later on tonight. Excuse me. This is land next to the Fox and Raven pub. It's near Chelmer Village, and that land could be used to build 55 new flats and houses if councillors give it the go-ahead later. However, concerns have been raised by some local residents who say building homes in that particular area is just too risky, and it'll lead to the new homes being flooded. Leonora Woolner is one of those residents worried, and Leonora's house is actually quite close to the proposed development. And Leonora with me now. Good morning, and thank you for coming in.
No problem.
Good morning. Thank you. So I think I remember speaking to you, Leonora, on breakfast about this before.
Yes.
So this is not a new plan, is it? It's been around.
No, it's taken a while to come to committee, and that's because this is really a very sensitive piece of land. It's 19th century landscape, but it floods. It's rural. It's got lots of checks and balances to protect it. But the affordable housing crisis is, yes, it's pretty genuine, but it is a national phenomenon. It's not just a local phenomenon. And what we must remember is that the Chelmsford Council are very good at having a bank of housing stock and supply and plans coming to market, and all of these should have 32 to 35% affordable housing in them. So there isn't the huge need for it here. Even whatever they say, it is a bit of a moot point, but it also needs to be put on land that is the least environmentally damaging to the people that could possibly live there. And this is a very sensitive piece of land because it is floodplain. It's also on a Greenwedge, it's also in a conservation area, but it is floodplain. And whether the land is slightly higher or not, we seem to forget that, we live in a city that has 3 rivers that converge just before our floodgates that then mould into one. And that catchment area for all of that water is actually 206 square miles. So we collect water from places in Brentwood, out towards Thaxted, out towards Malden, and it all comes to those gates and then goes into a single track. Now, those gates are less than half a mile away from this piece of land, and this piece of land is completely covered in water, or it absorbs water because it's permeable land, for most of the winter every year. Now,
it's not a million miles from where we are here in the studio.
Exactly.
I see it.
It's literally half a mile, and when you go to the Chelmer Bridge, you see the land there. Now, it may not be surface water on all of that part of the land, but actually for most of the time, it's about a foot deep in water. And putting concrete into that, it's like dropping a brick into a bucket full of water. You know what happens? It's going to overflow. And it's not fair to put properties there, that's number one. But I know this because our house is actually a watermill. We're an old watermill. We're one of the listed buildings in the area. We have gates. We have a shut. We have sluice gates. We have house gates. We can actually control water flow, and we actually help pull the water away from Chelmsford and then push it down to Sandford Mill.
Gosh, that sounds like quite a responsibility.
Well, it is a responsibility, and it's one that we take seriously. And I'm actually quite upset because this piece of planning is not part of the local plan. It's been put in, and it's being offered with the possibility of a country park on a completely unrelated piece of land, which is on the other side of us, which is also owned by the developer. Now, this is unrelated to this property, and it actually breaks all of the checks and balances that you should have when you offer a piece of land. I'm trying not to say inducement, but it's not related to this property, and it's not relevant to the property.
You can, obviously you'll know this, and I don't want to get too techie, but you can obviously build on floodplains, can't you?
Yes, if there is nothing else available. And if it's safe, at the end of the day, you should do no harm when you build. Now, that's not just harm to the people that could move into the land and, suffer from flooding issues or water being so close by, which is extremely stressful. I can, vouch that. I don't worry when we have high water because I know we've got all those checks and balances. Yeah. But if you're in an area where you can't control it coming in, this is also an entry for surface water. I don't know if you remember in 21 and 22, we had those summer rainstorms. Well, the Chalmer Village Way was about 9-10 inches deep in water, but the floodplain actually accepted it where they're actually going to put the opening to this development. So where's the water going to go?
Yeah.
You know, if you're only half a mile away from the where the water actually flows onto the floodplain, and this is an area that floods quicker than virtually anywhere else. Sunford Mill floods first, then that becomes blocked, and that's why it backs up towards Chelmsford, over towards Manor Farm, down to the Army and Navy, around our property, and water can hang around there sometimes for weeks when we have high water.
I mean, as I say, I drive past that area every day, and I have seen exactly that. I mean, the planning report says the Environment Agency, the lead local flood authority, Anglian Water, they've not raised any objections about this.
But they don't come.
Isn't that reassuring, though?
No, because they don't live on this piece of land. They don't see
They're experts.
No.
They've done their checks.
Shall I tell you, the Environment Agency released a new report last week that didn't even include our house in the floodplain. And our house has been there for hundreds of years. And if we're told by the Environment Agency, by the way, that if we had our gates blocked during high water, the Army and Navy would flood. And, you know, if we opened our gates in the summer, we could drop the water in Chelmsford. So we're an important part. We are reactive. And the floodplain strategy now, although it's pretty non-existent in Chelmsford, and we work independently because nobody tells us when they're opening gates or anything, but the strategy, if one of the main gates gets blocked, which then could cause everything to overflow, is non-existent because you have to wait for the water to go down to unblock the gates.
Yeah.
So it is very fine, this line. And, you know, I've been called a scaremonger by certain councillors, etc. I'm not. I've lived there for 26 years. We know how those gates work. And we know that now 3 times more water goes through those gates than when they were opened first in 1970.
We've seen quite a lot of changes to our weather systems in recent years, haven't we?
Weather changes are phenomenal. Now a day's rain means that we have to open everything.
Yeah.
It would actually take 2 or 3 days rain and, you know, a so-called 3-day event. We will get this rain, you know. Long-term weather forecasts say we're going to get extra 8-centimetre rainstorms. Now, we can't cope with a 5-centimetre rainstorm here in Chelmsford.
You have, I mean, your home, which is your castle, you know, and your life really is quite dominated by how much rain we're going to get, essentially, isn't it? It's the weather.
But as I say, we have all of the mechanics in place. I'm not coming at this from just our home. I can see the properties, you know, the Fox and Raven could suffer. You know, the Fox and Raven in high water, over the 26 we've been there, used to have flooding in their car park. They want to put a bund around this new property on the south side of the river. Now, the EA is saying that will have no effect. Well,
I was going to get on to that because I'm running out of time. No, you're okay. I'm running out of time, and I wanted to get to that. You mentioned this bund to protect the houses. The council says a bund is going to be built to protect the houses, so there's no risk of flooding. I mean, what is that? I get the impression you don't feel it's going to work. But
a bund is going to replace a line of trees which have been there for 30 years, and trees absorb water, etc., etc. A bund is a higher piece of, I don't know how they're going to build it. I don't know if it's going to be a wall or it's going to be a bank or whatever, but it bounces water away. In an area that's already underwater, that's not fair, and it's not fair on the neighbours, it's not fair on the people on the other side of the Chalmer Village Way, Way and the Chalmer Bridge, because that area, the area around Aspire, the area where the gasworks are now, which is underwater because they can't work on it because it's on floodplain, is all attracted to this area because the water flows underneath the bridge straight into this area. Putting the bund along the south side doesn't protect it on the north, on the east or the west sides. Water is still going to come in, and water could also come in with surface water flooding because this is an entry point, and I don't see where it's going to go. You can't, water doesn't matter about EA crosses on maps or anything. It goes where it needs to go. It floods.
We're running out of time. One quick last point though, Leonora. If these plans get passed tonight, what are you going to do?
Well, this application has been put together, let's say, in a very unusual way, and we've taken professional advice, and it's likely to go to a judiciary review with the Royal Town Planners Institute. It's that bad.
Okay, well, keep us posted, Leonora. We've chatted before, and I'm sure we'll chat again. Thank you for coming in. Leonora Woolner, whose house is very close to that proposed development in Chelmsford, very close to the city centre, as you've been hearing this morning. Let me bring you a statement on this from the City Council. They say all representations in response to planning applications are considered when making a decision on a development. The Environment Agency has considered this application in detail and has raised no objection to it going ahead. There's a specific section on flooding, the council says, within the report, and the information submitted confirms the bund will protect the development from flooding. The council says that about 2/3 of this site falls within what they call flood zone 1, which is deemed to be the lowest flood risk. It's the southern section of the site that falls within flood zones 2 and 3A, which is more severe risk of flooding. And mitigation measures are proposed to make the development safe, and the information submitted with the application demonstrates the development would not cause flooding to other properties or downstream. No development is proposed beyond the application boundary within the functional flood plan. And I think that the sort of functional side of it is where it's there to absorb the water, because there's different grades. As we mentioned earlier, you can build on floodplains, and of course we do have a need for more housing here in Essex, but other parts of the country as well. You can build on floodplains, but planning laws sort of designate them into different zones, the floodplains, whether they're at substantial risk or a less severe risk of flooding. What do you think about this? What do you think about building on some of those floodplains? If you've got any thoughts, 0800 111 40 41.
Winter has arrived,
Like a bit of wintry sunshine out and about.
bringing icy roads. Could even have a few patches of frost. And stormy nights.
Amber warning from the Met Office, perhaps bringing some localised flooding.
As the winter weather takes hold, we're here when you need